So 2020 saw the build cross over into its third decade and also the beginning of its 15th year, which sort of made me pretty excited to be getting down to where I'm putting colour onto the shell, because it felt like I was actually starting to get somewhere and get closer. So all the high build undercoat had been put on, and we started blocking it back, guide coating it, making it all nice and smooth. I keep saying we, and I mean I. So yeah, it was quite a lot of work once again, but when you start to get to this stage and you start to see it, you can see now that it's starting to look like a full car compared to what it used to be. Yeah, it feels like things will move along quite nicely. There's still a lot of things to do, and there's a lot of small stuff to do. It needs to be put in place to get to the car to the finish point. I'm going to show you some of that, not all of it, but there's absolute heaps. I might do some videos later on and just show you a lot of the small stuff. And I'm guessing that the small stuff is probably the stumbling block for a lot of people. I read somewhere once that 93% of the cars that get pulled apart never get put back together, and it would be because of all the small stuff. You can get the car to this stage and it's not too bad when you get stuck into it. The small stuff is tedious, things don't always go the way you plan, and it can do your head in. And you often go inside unhappy with what's happened for the day, come out the next day or 2 days later and you finally find a solution for it. So with the car now undercoated, I'd already painted the roof white. I just started taping up the roof to do the two-tone. Now the two-tone, I just picked a shape. They normally go dead straight across that rear quarter, but I just wanted to do something different, so I picked a shape and then made a template and done the other side. So I was committed to the two-tone, and the white roof had been painted and taped up, and now it's time to put on the blue. A few people said to me, why are you doing it two-tone? Some didn't like the idea. I showed them the demo, the sample, the mock-up and that, and people didn't like it, but I just wanted something different, and I really didn't care if people didn't like it. I liked it. But the curve of the two-tone, I knew there was not going to be any stainless steel to match that, but I eventually got talked into making a piece up because everyone kept telling me that it looked unfinished, and I'll show you that later down the track. But you can see how flat it was and everything went down really nice. Then when we put the clear on, when I put the clear on, I got a couple of runs in it, but after doing the panels I'd become a bit of an expert at removing runs, so it wasn't too big of a deal. So it was now at the stage it was just a matter of leaving it for a little while and then unpeeling all the mask off it and painting underneath the guards and all that sort of stuff, and then start to get the diff ready to start to put the diff in. So, but before I decided to get the diff together, I had to do that very important thing where you get the plastic bucket and set the wheels up to make sure the wheels look good against the painted cars, just because you didn't see it enough when it was just in an undercoat. So I got the old bucket out and set the wheels up, and I was quite happy with the wheels. I still wasn't 100% sure, but I was pretty happy with it. And the more I looked at it, the more I liked it, and it slowly grew on me. And by this time, my mate Tom from Mad About Metal had dropped back the stainless steel for around the windows and all that sort of stuff, so I stuck a bit of that on just to get an idea of how it was all going to look. I was very happy with the way it was all sitting. So we moved on to the diff and started putting all the diff together, pulled the diff out, cleaned it all out and got it ready, because the diff had been sitting for I don't know how long, 12 years or something like that, something ridiculous. So cleaned it all out, all looked fine, we put it in and got it underneath the car. So I still needed to paint the boot lid top and bottom, and a whole lot of small stuff. So as you'll notice, some of these photos are not in the correct order, but I've just put them in the way I sort of remember it, even though I know they're not correct, and it gives you an idea of what was happening, because I wasn't just getting onto something and doing the whole complete thing. Like if I didn't feel off it, some days I would just come out and do colour sanding where I should have probably been working on brakes or something like that. So I just picked the easy stuff and done it that way. Because when you're starting to work on the car every weekend and thinking about it all week, just trying to get it completed, it becomes a lot of work. And I'm not getting any younger at this stage. When I started this car I was 42, and I'm talking to you now in 2023 when I'm now 60. So when you take 17 years off your life and look back at it to 2005, it's quite daunting how long it's taken actually. So with the boot lid already painted, and I then need to move on and paint the dashboard in satin black 2-pack, and also the rear parcel shelf, and do underneath the guards for any overspray that might have got through. And so I did all that, and then we started moving on to rebuilding the front and rear brakes calipers. So I had gone out and purchased a small sandblasting box just for doing all the little tiny bits and pieces, because I knew there'd be heaps of those to do, and I really didn't want to try and wire brush them or wire wheel them. So I bought the little box, and then we started sandblasting them. And as I said back previous, a lot of small stuff doesn't always go as planned. And you can see there's a bolt stuck in it, which has probably been in there for I don't know how long. And tried to use the old easy out and end up welding nuts on things and getting them out that way. And some of these things took a lot longer than I expected, because I'd never ever pulled like rear calipers apart, and because they had the handbrake built in, they only go in a certain way, and you can get them backwards and they won't work. So the old digital camera came in handy. I took lots and lots of photos to make sure everything went back the way I pulled it apart. And so I got them all apart, and then, as I mentioned, put them into the sandblasting box, cleaned them all up and got ready to rebuild. So the sandblasting box was good. It wasn't very big and wasn't over powerful, but I'd done a good job and cleaned them all up quite nicely. There's still little bits and pieces left on them, and I dosed them all up with some anti-rust rust, because I don't know how long that rust had been on them. I'd had them for at least 15 years by this stage. But everything came up pretty sweet, and because I decided to go with the grey motor, I was going to do everything else with a grey theme, grey springs, calipers, motor, etc., stuff like that. So I'd done them in the caliper plate, grey caliper paint, and a primer. Got them all done. They come up quite nice. So you can see here, that's the rear brakes. Got them all back together. There's a few little tricks to putting that sort of stuff together. So I was really happy how the calipers all come up and how they looked. And more importantly, I was even very happy that they work really well. Yeah, so as I mentioned, everything went with the grey theme, and it was looking pretty sweet. Because the car had been pulled apart by someone else, they just ripped all the brake lines out and cut them all to get them out. So there was no brake lines to use for templates to create new ones. So building new brake lines took me a little bit longer than I expected, but they wanted $1,200. You could buy them for a set of brake lines, but to buy the benders, the folders, and the double clearing tool plus the tube only cost me like $120, and then I couldn't justify spending $1,200 compared to when I could do it myself for $120. So it was time to get the fuel tank back under the car, and I'd put a new sender in it. And because I'd painted the tank, it then stops the tank. Those straps normally earth the tank out, which then earths the fuel sender out. So then I had to put a little earth strap on that sender to make sure it all worked.
Well, fuel tank's in. What did I say? There's not much room under there for a fuel tank and a big fat bastard. Very little room, in fact.
So being happy with the way the fuel tank looked was then time to move on again to all those little small things that needed to be done to add other bigger pieces to the car. Things like the power steering box need to be painted and cleaned and all that sort of thing. So I started getting into that sort of stuff. Then it was on to steering. I had to swap the steering components over with the steering shaft because I had a column shift and a HZ, which I didn't want the HZ blinker shifter, so I had to change all that sort of stuff around. There was a fair bit of mucking around, and I can't remember where I put all the photos for that, but you sort of get the idea. And so what I was trying to do now was get everything I needed on the car so it would be easier for when I put the motor in, so I wouldn't have to be going back out and trying to work around the motor and things like that. And so, which is what we've done. And it's also time to swap the wheels out, put the proper wheels on the car to at least have it looking a bit nicer now, making it feel like we're getting somewhere. So I've done that, and I was quite happy with the way it was starting to look. And as I said, there's still more parts that needed doing, like the steering rod arms all rebuilt and cleaned, and the list just continued on and on and on. It never ended. Well, it felt like it never ended.